Imagine you're an engineer, maybe just someone really into technology. You've got this brilliant piece of software.
Right?
Perhaps it's been running key systems for years. Absolutely solid.
Yeah, like a workhorse component.
Exactly. Or maybe it's a commercial off-the-shelf thing, COTS, used everywhere, proven itself in the field, you'd think. Now, here's the challenge. You need to take that exact software and put it into something new, something highly safety critical.
Yeah.
Think railways, train control, signaling systems, stuff where failure is, well, unthinkable.
Huge consequences, yeah.
So the big question becomes, how do you prove, really rigorously prove, that this software, with all its history, actually meets the top safety standards, like a safety integrity level, assess HILE?
How do you make that operational history count
Yeah.
formally?
Because for software, this whole proven in use thing,
Yeah.
it's just not as simple as it is for, say, a metal bracket or something. It's different.
It's a very different beast.
So today, that's what we're digging into. We're going deep on how you can actually use statistics to assign a SIL to software, based purely on its real-world track record.
Yeah, we'll need to unpack what a software failure even means, because that term itself can be misleading.
Definitely. And we'll look at the math behind it, the models that let us do this rigorously, and really what kind of evidence, what kind of proof you actually need to make a solid, proven-in-use case.
It's a genuinely tricky but super important area. Because the usual way you certify software, it often involves these incredibly detailed upfront development processes, document everything from day one.
Right, the V model, all that stuff.
Exactly. And that works great for new software you're building from scratch, but it just doesn't map well onto software that already exists or those COTS components you mentioned.
Stuff where you maybe don't even have the original design documents anymore.
Precisely. But there's this huge pull, especially in railways, to reuse these components that have been out there working flawlessly for years. Avoid reinventing the wheel, save time, save money.
Makes sense.
But the roadblock is that the current railway standards, they talk a lot about safety, obviously, but they don't give you a clear recipe for how to make that proven in use argument for software specifically. There's a gap.
Oh, yeah.
So what we're trying to do today is explore a way to bridge that gap using a solid statistical approach, a scientific way to say, yes, this past success gives us confidence for future safety.
Okay, so our mission then is to kind of demystify all this, break down software reliability, explain the maths behind it, hopefully without making everyone's eyes glaze over.
We'll try. Keep it practical.
And show you exactly what kind of real-world proof you need to gather, how you can actually qualify software for these demanding safety jobs based on its history. It's about making smart, data-driven decisions, right? Speed things up, but keep safety number one.
Absolutely. That's the goal.
So let's start right at the beginning. Why do we even need this proven-in-use concept for software? Why not just, I don't know, recertify it the old way or analyze the code again?
That's a really good place to start. And the reasons are, well, mostly practical and economic. First off, there's just this huge desire to reuse existing software, COTS components.
The efficiency argument.
Totally. If you've got a component that does its job perfectly, it's been deployed widely, it's reliable, why wouldn't you want to use it in a new system, even a safety one? Industries like railways are always looking for ways to cut down the massive costs and long timelines of building everything custom from scratch.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So reusing proven tech is a big driver, leveraging what already works. And the second big reason is you often have products that were certified years ago, maybe under an older standard or to a lower SIL.
Right. Things change, standards evolve.
Exactly. And now you need to upgrade it, meet a higher SIL, comply with new rules, starting the software development all over again just to meet those new process requirements. Often it's just not practical. It's too expensive, too time-consuming.
So proven in use offers a way around that.
It offers a pathway, yeah.
Right.
A way to recognize the value of all that accumulated operational history. To say, look, this thing has run for millions of hours without a problem. That means something. It avoids unnecessary rework when the software's actual performance already speaks volumes.
I definitely see the attraction there. Leveraging that real-world, battle-tested experience.
Yeah.
It feels intuitive, makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But, okay, here's where we hit that conceptual wall, the thing that often trips people up. How do we even talk about a software failure? Because it's just so fundamentally different from hardware failure, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's the core issue we have to get our heads around.
Hardware fails, things wear out, components break down, rust, overheat,
That's
physical stuff.
Random events, degradation over time.
But software,
Yeah.
It doesn't wear out. Code doesn't rust.
Mm-hmm.
So what is a software failure?
Exactly. A software failure isn't a physical breakdown. It's almost always the activation of a flaw that was already there, a bug, latent in the
So
code.
it's designed in, essentially, or coded in.
Kind of, yeah. An error in logic and oversight. And this bug, it only shows itself under very specific conditions, often rare conditions, which is why it might not have been caught in testing.
Okay.
And it's really crucial to be clear here. The software itself, the code, it doesn't technically fail, it just executes its instructions deterministically. What happens is, because of the bug, it produces an incorrect result.
I see.
And then when the physical system acts on that wrong information, that's when you get a system failure or a dangerous situation. So the software causes the wrong output, which leads to the system failing.
That distinction feels really important.
It's fundamental. It steers us away from thinking about reliability purely in terms of wear and tear, like we do for hardware. It's a different paradigm.
Okay, so if software doesn't fail like a physical part, if it doesn't degrade, how on earth do we predict its failure behavior? How do we assign it a safety level, a SL? It sounds like a really tough nut to crack.
It has been. It's something researchers and engineers have been grappling with for a long time because it forces us beyond traditional reliability engineering methods.
Right.
And that's why the search for a solid general mathematical model has been so critical. The aim is to build the whole proven-in-use argument on a framework that's broad, something that applies to lots of different products, including complex railway systems, without being overly restrictive or based on, dodgy assumptions.
I want something robust.
Exactly. If the model holds up under general mathematical conditions, we can have much more confidence applying it to real, diverse, complex systems out there.
And it's interesting, when you look at the safety standards landscape, you mentioned the key railway ones, like EN 50126, 50128, 50129. You're saying they don't actually give clear instructions on how to do this proven-in-use thing for software?
Surprisingly, no. Not explicitly. They might mention proven in use for systems in general, maybe for hardware. But for software, despite it being everywhere now, there's very little specific guidance on using operational history this way.
Huh. Why do you think that is? Is it just that software is newer in these critical roles?
That's a big part of it, yeah. Safety standards, especially in industries like railways, often grew out of mechanical and electrical engineering. Those fields had well-understood ways to quantify reliability based on physical failure modes.
Things you can measure and predict.
Right, software's different. Its failure modes are conceptual, logical. When these standards were first written, understanding software reliability was still, evolving.
So they defaulted to what they knew.
Kind of. There was a strong preference for process-based certification. Basically, you prove safety by showing you followed a super rigorous development process. Design reviews, intensive testing, formal methods, documentation up the wazoo.
Which works for new software.
Exactly. If you're building it now, you can follow that process. But it doesn't help if you're looking at existing software, maybe something developed before those standards were even in place, or using a COTS component where you have zero visibility into its original development.
Right. You can't retroactively apply a process.
Precisely. So the lack of clear guidance for software proven in use reflects that historical focus on process and also, frankly, the difficulty of quantifying safety for something that doesn't physically break down in a predictable way. It left a real gap.
And engineers had to kind of figure it out themselves.
Pretty much. Or rely on extremely conservative assumptions that weren't very practical. And look, this isn't a new problem. People have been wrestling with this for decades. There were earlier attempts. Some statistical methods were explored, sometimes distinguishing between systems running continuously versus those used on demand.
Like constantly monitoring versus only acting when needed.
Exactly. They tried using different probability models like exponential distributions, binomial distributions. There was even an annex in a big international standard, IEC 615087, that suggested a way to do statistical evaluation for software reliability.
Okay, so there was something.
There was, and it's a big but.
Yeah.
It became really controversial. For all the reasons we're talking about, it was complex, the assumptions were debated, and it's actually being heavily revised right now.
And some of the really early models, they were based on very simple probability concepts, almost like drawing balls from an urn. Abstract tools,
Too simple for reality.
Way too simple.
Yeah.
They ended up leading to incredibly strict requirements. Like, you needed an absolutely astronomical number of failure-free hours to prove anything. It just wasn't practical for real-world software. Set the bar impossibly high.
Okay, so those early attempts had limitations. How do we build a better model now?
Right, so let's set the stage for a more robust mathematical approach. We're thinking about a product that's already developed. It's a mix of software and the hardware it runs on,
The whole packet.
the whole package. Now, hardware failures, we can sort of split them. You've got your random failures where aging, component breakdown, those are pretty well understood, modeled with things like exponential or Weibull distributions, standard reliability stuff.
Okay.
But hardware can also have systematic failures, design flaws, errors in the chip logic, maybe.
Like a bug in the hardware. Essentially, yes. Less common in mature hardware, maybe, but possible. And interestingly, we treat these systematic hardware flaws very much like software errors, because they too are often triggered by specific, rare external conditions or inputs.
Ah, so they behave similarly from a trigger perspective.
Exactly. Now, for the software failures themselves, the model needs a bit more care. We generally simplify things by assuming the software is deterministic, meaning no internal random factors like reading unpredictable system time or using uninitialized memory.
Given the same inputs, it does the same thing every time.
Precisely. But, and this is the key, while the logic is deterministic, the state the software is in and whether a bug gets triggered depends hugely on its past states and, crucially, the input data it receives from the outside world.
The environment it's running in.
Yes. Think of it like this. There's this mind-bogglingly huge space of all possible inputs and all the internal states the software could ever reach. A bug represents a tiny, tiny fraction of those states, let's call them incorrect states, that lead to a failure, an unsafe output.
Okay, a bad region in that state space.
Exactly. So even though the software logic is fixed, if the inputs coming in are random changing all the time because of the real world, then hitting one of those rare end states, triggering the bug, happens like a random spike in its operation. The bug's always there, but random external events make it surface.
Okay, that makes sense. The randomness comes from the outside, interacting with the deterministic but flawed inside.
You got it. And this leads us to a really powerful simplification based on some deep math. We make two crucial assumptions to model this. First, we assume that individual software failures triggering different bugs essentially are decoupled. They can be treated as independent events. One bug happening doesn't make another unrelated bug more likely.
Okay, reasonable for distinct flaws.
And second, these failures are inherently rare events. They happen only a very small fraction of the total operating time. This rarity is mathematically very important.
Right, if they happened all the time, it wouldn't be very useful software anyway.
Exactly. And these two assumptions, independence and rarity, are precisely what let us bring in a powerful statistical theorem, Grigilionis's theorem.
Okay, Grigilionis sounds important. What does it tell us?
It's fascinating. It basically says that if you have lots and lots of separate independent processes, and each one only contributes a small, rare event, then if you add up or superimpose all those processes, the overall result converges towards a specific type of process called a homogeneous Poisson process.
Poisson process. I've heard that term in reliability.
You have. It's fundamental. And what Grigilionis's theorem tells us is why it's so relevant here. For software, it means a few conditions need to be met for this to apply rigorously.
Okay, what are they?
First, the software needs to be exposed to random external influences that actually trigger these latent errors. Varied inputs, different operating sequences. The environment needs to poke the software randomly.
Keep it on its toes.
Kind of. Second, the chance of any single specific bug being triggered has to be small, and different bugs should generally trigger independently. Third, the whole process needs to be stationary.
Stationary.
Meaning, the basic conditions don't change over time. The operating environment stays roughly the same, and critically, the software version doesn't change. No patches, no updates during the observation period.
Ah, that's a big one. Same software, same environment.
Crucial. And finally, if a failure does occur, the system is usually restarted or repaired in some way, and then it keeps operating. This idea of a repairable system fits perfectly with the Poisson process model.
Okay.
So this theorem gives us strong mathematical backing for why using a Poisson process to model these rare software failure events is often a really good approximation, even for incredibly complex software. And it also applies to the systematic hardware failures we talked about earlier because they're triggered similarly.
So if we can make a good case that software failures are these rare independent events triggered randomly by the environment and the system gets restarted, then Poisson is our model.
Poisson is our model. And the beauty of the Poisson process, for practical purposes, is that the time between these failure events follows an exponential distribution.
Exponential distribution. Okay, that rings a bell too. Easier math.
Much easier math. It makes the statistical analysis, the actual calculation of reliability from data, far more straightforward. It gives us a solid, practical foundation.
Right, so we've got our theoretical underpinning. Poisson process leads to exponential distribution for time between failures. How do we actually use this?
Okay, so for a system that's used continuously, the Poisson process is our starting point. And then we use the properties of the exponential distribution to do the statistical heavy lifting to make inferences from the data we collect.
But wait, before we jump to formulas,
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned conditions. There must be some strict rules about the data itself, right? You can't just grab any old numbers.
Absolutely critical. These prerequisites are non-negotiable. Get these wrong, and the math, no matter how elegant, is worthless.
Okay, lay them on us. The rules of the road.
Rule 1. The historical operating environment, the way the software was used or tested, must be truly representative of how it's going to be used in the new safety-critical application.
So, no using data from a quiet lab if it's going on a vibrating train.
Exactly. Apples to apples as much as possible. Rule 2. The probability of seeing no failure has to be directly proportional to the runtime. This implies that underlying assumption of a constant failure rate.
But the failure rate doesn't suddenly spike or drop off.
Right, and for that to hold, you need subconditions. Stable use conditions, no wild changes in environment, the software itself must not change, same version, no patches, and the underlying hardware and operating system need to be stable too.
That same version point seems really key.
It's absolutely fundamental. Any change invalidates the past data for that specific version. Rule 3, you need a rock-solid way to detect every single failure, every single one that's relevant to safety.
Can't sweep any under the rug.
No. Missing even one dangerous failure blows the whole argument. Rule 4, you must have recorded a specific, verifiable total test time T. This is the accumulated failure-free operational time across all units you're considering.
Got it. A total runtime without issues.
And the final crucial part of that, no dangerous failures occurred during that specific time T. If you had failures, the calculation changes completely. We're focusing here on the zero failure case, which is often what you need for high SIL arguments.
Okay, that's a hefty list of requirements. Data integrity is everything.
It really is. Now, if all those conditions are met, then we can calculate an upper bound for the dangerous failure rate, which we call lambda. The formula is LLNT.
Okay, kiloton.
Yeah.
Let's break that down. Lambda is the failure rate we're estimating. What's T?
T is that total accumulated time of failure-free operation we just talked about, measured in hours, usually.
And alpha? What's that?
Yeah. Alpha is the statistical significance level, or you can think of it as the probability of making a first-kind error. Usually we set it at 5% or 0.05.
A 5% chance of what?
A 5% chance that our calculated lambda is too optimistic. In other words, we're aiming for 95% confidence that the true dangerous failure rate is actually no worse than the lambda we calculate using this formula. It builds in a safety margin for statistical uncertainty.
Okay, so that Balani part isn't just random. It's related to that confidence level.
Exactly. It comes directly from the mathematics of the exponential distribution and confidence intervals when you've observed zero events. When you haven't seen any failures, you can't just say the failure rate is zero. Statistics doesn't work like that.
Right. Just because you haven't seen it doesn't mean it's impossible.
Precisely. So this formula gives you a statistically justified upper bound. It says, based on seeing no failures in towers, we are 95% confident the true rate is no higher than this calculated lambda. It's a conservative estimate designed for safety.
Got it. It accounts for the uncertainty of not having seen a failure yet. So we do the math, we get our lambda. How does that number connect back to the safety integrity levels, the SILs?
Okay, so SILs, as you know, have target failure rates associated with them. Specific thresholds for dangerous failures per hour. For example, SIL2 typically requires a dangerous failure rate less than 10 to 6 per hour. SIL1 is less than 10 to 5 per hour.
Lower SIL number means stricter requirement, lower allowed failure rate.
Correct. So let's plug in some numbers to see what this means in practice. Suppose you need to show your software meets SIL1 requirements. The target is 10 to 5 dangerous failures per hour.
Yep.
If we use our formula, NES-LNT with SLN 0.05, we rearrange to solve for T. So TSLN 0.05, 10 to 5.
Okay, crunching the numbers, an SLN 0.05 is about 3.
Roughly 2.9957. Yeah, let's call it 3 for simplicity. So TSI1, 10 to 5.
Which is 300,000 hours.
Exactly. 300,000 hours of failure-free operation.
Wow, that's a lot of hours.
It is. That's over 34 years of nonstop, 247 operation for a single device.
Which is usually unrealistic.
Usually, yes. So in practice, you achieve this by adding up the failure-free hours for many identical units operating in the field. Maybe 100 units running perfectly for 3,000 hours each, or 1,000 units for 300 hours each.
Okay, so it's the aggregate time across the fleet.
Yes, provided they all meet those prerequisites, same software, same environment, good failure detection, etc. But that number, 300,000 hours just for SIL1, really drives home the scale of evidence needed. It's not a trivial amount of data to collect and verify.
And just to be clear, this formula, this calculation, it's grounded in solid stats, right? Not just a rule of thumb.
Absolutely. It's derived directly from the properties of the Poisson process and the exponential distribution. It's about calculating the probability of seeing 0 events in time and using that to set a confidence limit on the underlying rate. Standard statistical practice and reliability engineering.
Okay. Good to know it's robust.
And one more crucial point here, this calculated software failure rate, it's only one part of the overall system safety.
Ah, right. You mentioned the hardware earlier.
Exactly. The total system failure rate is typically the sum of the failure rates of all its critical components, hardware and software. So maybe your software achieves a fantastic 5 by 10 to 6 per hour.
Better than SL1 needs.
Right. But maybe your hardware components add up to 6 by 10 to 6 per hour.
Yep.
You add them together. 5 plus 6 equals 11. So 11 by 10 to 6, or 1.1 by 10 to 5 per hour.
Which is worse than the 10 to 5 limit for SL1.
Precisely. Your software was good enough, but the system as a whole might not meet the SI1 requirement because of the hardware contribution. Every piece matters. You have to look at the total picture.
That's a really important takeaway. It's the system SIL, not just the software SIL in isolation. Okay, this is making sense theoretically. Let's make it more concrete.
Yeah.
You mentioned some real-world examples earlier, cases that highlight the challenges.
Yes, absolutely. Looking at past incidents, even hypothetical analyses can be incredibly instructive. Let's talk about the Therac 25.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
The radiation therapy machine. That was tragic.
It was. Between 85 and 87, massive radiation overdoses caused by software errors. Now, let's imagine applying our proven-in-use model before the first major incident. Maybe the machines had accumulated, across several hospitals, say, 50,000 hours of operation that seemed flawless at the time.
Okay, 50,000 hours. It seems like a decent amount.
It does, intuitively. But if we plug that into our SELA1 calculation, we needed 300,000 hours, remember?
Right.
50,000 hours is nowhere near that. It's almost an order of magnitude less. So even with what looked like significant runtime, a rigorous statistical proven-in-use argument for SL1 wouldn't have held up, not even close.
So the statistics would have raised a red flag, potentially.
Potentially, yes, if applied rigorously and targeting a specific SIL. And understanding the nature of the Therac 25 bugs is key. One infamous bug, a race condition, only occurred if the operator typed commands incredibly quickly in a very specific sequence.
Something unlikely, hard to test for, maybe.
Exactly. Operators literally had to practice to get the timing right to trigger it. Another involved an arithmetic overflow during a calculation, which caused a safety check variable to wrap around to 0, effectively disabling the check.
Wow.
These perfectly illustrate the point. Systematic software bugs triggered by specific, often rare, random environmental conditions in this case, the timing and sequence of operator inputs. The bugs were always there, just waiting.
So the lesson is, quantity of hours alone isn't the whole story.
Not at all. The quality of those hours, the operating context, the types of inputs received, and the hidden nature of software bugs, they're all critical. 50,000 hours of normal use might never encounter the specific trigger sequence.
That Therac 25 example really hits home about the specific conditions. And you mentioned context being key. What about the Ariane 5 failure?
Yes. Ariane 5 Flight 501, 1996, maiden flight, failed spectacularly just seconds after launch, all due to a software error.
The relevant part for us is why it failed, right?
Yeah.
It involved reused software.
Yep, exactly. The component that failed, the inertial reference system software, was taken directly from the Ariane 4 rocket. And Ariane 4 was incredibly successful, 113 launches. Talk about proven in use, right?
Sounds like the perfect candidate on paper.
It did. But here's the catch. The specific error was a data conversion problem. Trying to fit a 64-bit floating point number, representing horizontal velocity, into a 16-bit integer.
Why was it even doing that?
It was code left over from Ariane 4, where that conversion was needed for alignment before launch. On Ariane 5, it wasn't actually needed after liftoff, but the code was still active. The problem was, Ariane 5 had a very different flight path, much higher horizontal acceleration right after launch compared to Ariane 4.
Ah, so the numbers got bigger.
Much bigger. Big enough that the 64-bit value exceeded what the 16-bit integer could hold. Overflow, processor crash, system failure, boom.
Wow, so the software worked fine on Ariane 4 for years.
Millions of hours, arguably, across all those launches and ground tests. But the operational environment changed. Different rocket, different trajectory, different physical parameters. That seemingly small change in input conditions completely invalidated all that prior experience.
The stationary conditions assumption was broken.
Massively broken. Even though the code was identical, the context wasn't. Ariane 5 is probably the ultimate cautionary tale for proven in use. You must ensure the operational context remains similar, or at least that the new context is bounded by the old one. Small changes can negate vast amounts of history.
Those are powerful examples. What about your own experiences? Applying this model in real projects, what are the practical hurdles you hit?
Yeah, moving from theory and famous disasters to actual project work,
Yeah.
you see different challenges. We had one really good success story, actually. Railway technology project.
Oh, good. Tell us about that.
We managed to demonstrate SIL-1 compliance using exactly this statistical method. And the reason it worked, the organization had fantastic data discipline, an incredibly reliable, easily searchable database logging all software faults.
I love them. Wow.
Yes, and crucially, they were categorized dangerous, non-dangerous, etc. And they had precise, verifiable records of in-service time for a large number of units. The data was clean, accessible, auditable. That made all the difference. Good data is gold here.
So good data management was key. What about less successful stories or harder ones?
Well, there was another case where the raw data was technically there. Lots of logs, incident reports, enough hours probably, but it was a mess. Not structured for safety analysis at all.
Uh-oh.
It took 3 solid months of just sifting, manually reading through everything, figuring out if a failure was relevant, if it was dangerous. Painstaking work.
3 months just sorting data.
Yeah. It did eventually lead to a successful qualification, but it really highlighted the labor involved if the data isn't collected with this kind of analysis in mind from the start. It's not just having data, it's having usable data.
That sounds exhausting. Any other pitfalls?
There was another one, a plant control system. Pretty good operational record, lots of units, enough hours theoretically. Everyone sort of knew it was reliable, but they simply couldn't formally prove the service hours. The data was scattered everywhere, different maintenance logs, maybe local counters on machines, nothing centrally tracked or auditable. The evidence needed for that crucial tie value, impossible to assemble reliably within a reasonable time frame.
So the knowledge was there informally, but no formal proof.
Exactly. The information felt like it was there, but without verifiable, documented evidence, you can't make the statistical safety case to an assessor. The argument just collapses.
So boiling down those experiences, it sounds like the big practical roadblocks are often either wrestling with a sheer mountain of poorly organized data.
Yeah, the sifting challenge.
Or just the fundamental difficulty of proving the numbers. Verifiable evidence of failure-free time and the absence of dangerous failures.
Precisely. Data integrity and traceability. Without those, the math doesn't matter.
Okay, so stepping back a bit. What we've seen is that even though software failure is weird and different from hardware, these robust statistical ideas like the Poisson process seem to emerge consistently from different angles.
They do. Different approaches under very general conditions tend to converge on that same conclusion. A limiting Poisson distribution often describes these rare independent failure events. It's a bit like the central limit theorem in statistics. Fundamental patterns emerge even from complex systems. It gives us confidence we're on solid ground.
Which means we can feel pretty comfortable using those core Poisson assumptions we talked about earlier, right?
Right.
Let's just quickly recap those because they seem so central.
Good idea.
One was proportionality. Chance of one failure in a short time is proportional to how long that time is. Makes intuitive sense.
Double the time. Roughly double the chance, all else being equal.
2 was singularity. Basically, 2 failures don't happen at the exact same microsecond. They're distinct events.
Negligible probability of simultaneous events, yeah. Simplifies counting.
3 was homogeneity. The failure rate stays constant over time if the conditions stay constant. No sudden degradation or improvement without a reason.
Crucial for using a single lambda value. Assumes stability.
And 4 was independence. A failure now doesn't make a failure later more or less likely. Events don't influence each other directly.
Right, allows us to add up experience from different times or units easily.
So those 4 assumptions underpin the whole model.
They do, but, and we keep coming back to this, for the application to work, for the proven-in-use argument to be valid for safety, those real-world conditions are paramount.
Remind us of the absolute must-haves.
Okay, must have one. The random influence of the environment and the historical data must truly represent the environment in the new application. Similar inputs, similar stresses, similar surrounding components. Context is king. REN 5 taught us that.
Right. Representative use.
Must have 2. All relevant failures must be recorded and observable. Your detection system has to be comprehensive and reliable. No hiding failures, intentionally or unintentionally.
Complete data.
Must have 3. All lifetimes and usage times must be meticulously recorded. When was it running? When was it off? When was it maintained? You need that accurate, auditable, teen value. Traceability.
Meticulous records. It sounds like bookkeeping is as important as the statistics.
In many ways it is. The statistics only work if the input data is trustworthy.
And what's interesting is you're saying this isn't brand new thinking. This idea of Poisson applying to software failures has been around.
Oh yeah, for decades. Researchers confirmed this general validity quite some time ago. It basically validated what many engineers felt intuitively about how complex software behaved in the real world over long periods. It's not revolutionary, it's applying established principles carefully.
So the math is elegant, it simplifies things. But the hard part is the groundwork.
Absolutely. The math gives us the framework, makes the calculation tractable, but the real challenge, and where safety assessors need to dig deep, is verifying that those foundational requirements, the data collection, the environmental stability, the failure detection, were truly met. As the example showed, that's where these arguments often succeed or fail in practice. It's about the rigor of the evidence, not just the elegance of the formula.
So thinking about our audience, engineering students, people starting their careers, railway safety folks, what's the big message here?
I think the message is that statistical proven-in-use for software is a genuinely powerful tool. It's valid. It allows us to leverage real-world data, which is incredibly valuable, especially when developing new systems is so costly and time-consuming.
It offers a practical path forward.
It does, but
There's always a but.
there's always a but. The profound takeaway, I think, isn't about the math itself. The math is robust. The real challenge, the part that requires intense discipline and honesty, is the data.
The meticulous collection, the rigorous analysis.
Yes, and that honest assessment. Is the past experience really relevant to this new situation? Are the operating conditions truly similar? Have we captured all the necessary information accurately and verifiably?
It comes back to fundamentals, data integrity, understanding context.
Exactly. Even with sophisticated models, those basics are paramount in safety engineering. It's not just about plugging numbers into an equation, it's about building a truly convincing, evidence-based case that this system is safe in this specific application.
It's about genuine safety, not just ticking a box.
Precisely. And this raises a really interesting question for the future, doesn't it? As software gets even more complex, as development cycles get faster, how do we get better at building systems that collect this kind of safety-relevant data by design?
Build the monitoring and data logging in from the start.
Yeah. How can we make it easier, more seamless, to gather the evidence needed to support these vital, proven-in-use arguments later on, so it's less of an archaeological dig through old logs each time?
That's a great challenge for the next generation of engineers. Building safety assurance in, including the data needed to prove it.
It's a huge opportunity, I think.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive. We've really unpacked the complexities of proven-in-use for software, from the stats and the Poisson process right down to the practical challenges of data and those cautionary tales like Cerex 25 and Ariane 5.
Hopefully, yes. The goal was to show how operational experience can be used scientifically for safety, but also to be really clear about the critical conditions and the rigor required for those arguments to actually be trustworthy.
Absolutely. Lots to think about there. Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive.
Thanks for digging in with us.
Until next time, keep asking questions, keep learning, and stay well informed.